that there's no sound. Can you confirm that there
Is
is
there
indeed
no
sound?
sound? Well, we're going to wait and make sure that there is now because I don't think that that's a problem.
Well, let's see. I
I think
just
it's
turned on
fixed.
YouTube and
I don't think it was broken, but I think it's fixed.
can we get a confirmation
Can
in the
we get a
chat?
confirmation in the chat?
There we go.
There
There
we
we go.
go. There we go. So I'll go ahead and delete this and re-upload the YouTube with audio at the front when we get done here. But that's all good. We're ready to rock and roll now. We did the pleasantries in silence, but that's okay. We're both doing all right coming in to break down back-to-back wins for the Cincinnati Bengals here on Chatterbox and getting into the key plays. This play was a fan submission to start. Not necessarily a fan submission, but it was in the comments right as we were ending the live stream on Sunday. Please make sure you have this play in there on Tuesday night because we don't know what happened on this one. And boy, I can tell you that this one stuck out in my mind as well because I wasn't sure what what happened either. And we're talking about early in the second quarter here. They asked Devin Cochran, starting at left tackle in place of Orlando Brown, to do something pretty crazy here, and that's to pull down and block Jeffrey Simmons on a run play. And Jeffrey Simmons, an all-pro level D lineman here, and that's a big-time task for a practice squad tackle in Devin Cochran, and he just doesn't have a chance. Doesn't have a chance. Jeffrey Simmons blows that one up, but he wasn't the only one who didn't quite touch Jeffrey Simmons. You'll see Alex Kappa lined up right in front of him. Not quite his job here as Cochran's pulling across to block him out, but you would still like to get a hand on Simmons, help out the guy in his first start, but no, Kappa gets right out there to the end. Mims works up to the second level. It's actually blocked pretty nicely if Cochran was able to get to Simmons, but such a tall task for the new tackle that I don't think that play had any chance of working.
No, there's no chance that this play works. And like you said, Kappa either has to impact Jeffrey Simmons there, or I don't understand why you wouldn't just have Kappa stay home, block Simmons, have Mims block the edge, and then you can have Cochran pull around and get to the second level if you really want to add an extra blocker to that side. But why you would ever ask Devin Cochran to come around and try and block up one of the best nose tackles in the league one-on-one with a delayed start is beyond me. Makes no real sense. This is just one of those play calls. We talked about it earlier this year where Willie Anderson volunteered to be, hey, that ish ain't going to work, coach.
Yeah.
They needed a that ish ain't going to work, coach, on this one because you're never going to get around in time unless you have Kappa really affect the route of Jeffrey Simmons on that play, or just change it completely, keep Simmons home, allow Mims to block on the edge, or if you really care, have Mims get to the second level like he was doing anyway and have Cochran come around on the edge. But having him come around and try and block Jeffrey Simmons right up the gut on a run that, oh, by the way, went right up the gut makes no real sense. It did appear to be a RPO of some sort, but yeah, that doesn't really change anything in my mind.
If Joe Burrow keeps the ball to throw it, Jeffrey Simmons is in his lap instead. Nothing really changes there.
Blown up from the beginning.
Absolutely. And the start of this game was rough for Devin Cochran. There were a lot of plays on the first couple of drives that really stuck out, that he was in there and that he really wasn't quite ready to play. But on the Bengals' first touchdown drive of the game, the second drive of the game, when they got down in the red zone, Joe Burrow made an incredible play to get the ball to Chase Brown. But the guy that really jumps off the page to me when watching this one is Devin Cochran. What an unbelievable play here by the left tackle. Just eating his man alive for 25 seconds, just putting him in the dirt. Joe Burrow doing what Joe Burrow does. But after he throws, Cochran's still putting him in the dirt. He doesn't take a break at any point in time during this play. 92 tries to get back up. Nope, back in the dirt. Back in the dirt. Lays on him. Just an incredible play from a practice squad tackle. Really getting into the groove of the game early, getting some of that aggression. And that's what you want to see from a guy that you don't really have a lot of faith in going into the game. To do something like that to start makes you feel a lot better about your protection if you're Joe Burrow going on throughout the game.
Yeah, look, I mean, we're not going to play dumb here. I mean, Cochran had some rough outings. Let Arden Key go pretty easily on a couple early plays, but it felt like he settled in pretty well and definitely took care of Jalen Harrell on that play. And Jalen Harrell, obviously, once he goes down like that, Cochran disrespectful at that point, if we're being honest. And then one of my favorite parts is this one right here at the end of the play. 57, Gifford just, after all of that, just kind of shrugs. Like, what are we supposed to do? 9 seconds for Joe Burrow back there. Joe changed his field like 4 different times. He starts off looking right, changes it, comes up the middle, nothing there, goes left, nothing there, steps up. Oh, shoot, there's Jeffrey Simmons. Get out of the pocket, evade again. And then, oh, look, Chase Brown gets open and nothing Gifford can do at that point after 9 seconds of playing defense. I think pretty much any team in the NFL, if you can avoid a holding penalty at that point or an illegal man downfield at that point, you're going to get a receiver open. And that's the other piece of this is, tip the cap to the offensive line for not picking up a penalty on that. I mean, literally 9 seconds is what they timed it at for time that Joe Burrow had to throw that ball. And, that's a long time for the offensive line to hold a block. That's a long time for a defensive back to hold a receiver. So, I mean, a lot of good things from that play for sure. Not the least of which is Joe Burrow and his ability to make plays.
Absolutely. And that 9 seconds, the longest snap to throw on a touchdown of Joe Burrow's career. We've talked about it week in and week out. We pull in a play really every week of him doing exactly that. And it's just crazy how consistent he is with the stuff that is so abnormal. He does plays like that seemingly week in and week out, 2 or 3 of them after he's getting killed. And we have it coming up after this next play on a touchdown pass to T. Higgins with a body right in his chest, making a throw that most people can't make. These abnormalities, these great plays seem to be relatively normal with Joe Burrow, and I just don't want to become, complacent as a fan and come to expect a lot of this stuff, because even watching that one the first time I watched it through, it was, oh my gosh, Devin Cochran, what an incredible play. And it's like, Joe Burrow is running around for 9 seconds in the backfield. That's incredible. That's Lamar Jackson-esque. That's stiff arm on Sam Hubbard-esque to buy that much time to throw a touchdown. I hate to bring up bad memories, but I mean that's stuff you don't expect from a guy who's labeled as a pocket passer, field general type of quarterback like Joe Burrow. So mobile, always running to throw, and that's just great to see something that we've seen continue to blossom this year for Burrow. This play, really fun in the moment, came with a little bit more of a somber note afterwards, as it might be the local kid's last play in stripes. Sam Hubbard in on the play, reports eligible, and catches a touchdown. A really fun gimmick for Zach Taylor. A good play call here where Hubbard makes a great play on the ball, but a good throw by Burrow gets Hubbard in one-on-one coverage there, and he even gets a step on the linebacker. Hubbard goes up, makes a play, comes down on the knee where he suffered the PCL injury. But a really good play design there where Joe Burrow really has all the time in the world to set his feet after Chase Brown gets the block on the blitzing linebacker. So a good play design there by Taylor. We kill him a lot, but it's important down in the red zone to complement the play calling as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Bengals, unfortunately, have been on the receiving end of 2 big man touchdowns earlier on in the year. So nice to get one back there. And like you mentioned, a nice, gift for Sam Hubbard. I know a lot of people in the locker room, big fans of Sam, and
absolutely,
not to play conspiracy theorist here, Jacob, but I watched that. I watched the celebration. I watched him running. Like, where did he get hurt?
I don't know.
And
cause he got a full celebration.
This is a guy who's been injured since training camp, but hasn't been on the injury report. And now all of a sudden he catches a touchdown, doesn't signs of injury, and now's the time that he's going to be out for the year. I don't know. That's I don't know. I don't know.
If you're saying it, I'm not saying it. But yeah, PCL injury for Sam Hubbard. Seems like that's going to be the end of his season. And if it is, we've been talking about it for a while.
Was that an intentional jab at Gerard Mayo?
No, it wasn't.
No? Oh, okay. Did you see that?
No.
Not to be off topic here.
Go for it.
Yeah, there was a post-game press conference clip of Gerard Mayo where someone was asking him about the play calling. And rather than defending it, Gerard Mayo's response was, You're saying it, not me.
Oh no, that's brutal. That's absolutely brutal. Not what you want to hear from a head coach. But yeah, no, that's certainly a conspiracy theory there from old Craig Sandlin. Just all on, I guess that way, all on that side of the table. But yeah, look, Sam Hubbard's played through a lot this year. A play like that to be the injury that sets him down for the rest of the season would certainly be a shame. He's a guy that's played the vast majority of defensive snaps all year, whether we like it or not. It's important to have those bodies out there, especially this late in the season as injuries continue to mount for everybody. You said what the contract number was next year. He's set to make around $9 million next year on the Bengals. With a number that high, and I know he had a touchdown catch, one target, one catch, one touchdown. That's pretty good production, but he is paid to be an edge rusher, and he's not very good at that position anymore at this time in his career. And at a $9 million number, it really seems like a no-brainer to let Sam Hubbard go, or at the very least, pretty significant restructure if he wants to stay in Cincinnati.
Yeah, this is a guy that came into the year and, you expected him to be opposite Trey Hendrickson and really be able to give you a lot of production. And it was pretty clear really early on that he wasn't going to be able to do that for you. And, I think the Bengals recognized that eventually. It took him about 5 weeks to really affect his snap count. But over the last couple of weeks, that number's just continued to decline. Obviously, the injury played a role in that this week, but last week only played 21 snaps, 35% of the defensive snaps. At this point, you certainly can't afford to pay a guy $9 million to be playing 20 snaps a game. And if we're being honest, other guys right now are just better than him on the edge. And so I'm not opposed to keeping him around from a veteran presence standpoint and from the standpoint of like maybe bringing him in on some short yardage downs, give him 10 to 15, maybe 20 plays per game. But what you can't afford to do with Sam Hubbard moving forward is paying him $9 million and expecting him to be Trey Hendrickson B.
Right.
Because he hasn't been anywhere near that this year, unfortunately. And for a guy who is a local kid and went to OSU and has been a fan favorite since coming to the Bengals, it's unfortunate to see, and certainly want success for Sam Hubbard and his career and moving forward. But at this point, it just can't be part of the equation to be paying him $9 million next year. So whether he's willing to restructure or not, I assume that the Bengals will revisit that conversation come the end of the season. But with having to pay guys like Burrow and Chase and potentially Higgins,
right,
you're just left in a situation where he can't be part of that equation.
Absolutely. And the tough part about this conversation is we haven't seen as much as we'd want to see out of the backup, Myles Murphy, first-round pick a couple of years ago, the guy that seemingly would slide into that Trey Hendrickson B role next to on the opposite side of Hendrickson when Hubbard is moved out of there, or at least moved to a backup role. Myles Murphy might not be going all the way there on the stat sheet, not getting the sacks, the pressures, the hits we want, but against the Titans, he played more snaps. I think it was his second highest snap total of the entire season after Hubbard's injury being in there as much as he was, and he registered a 35% pass rush win rate in Week 15 against the Titans, which is the second best win rate by a Bengals defender in a game this season, behind Hendrickson's 40% against the Rams, or Chargers, against LA. And that's something that you can build on, because last year, though he didn't have those sacks and statistics as well, he had one of the highest pass rush win rates in the entire class. And eventually that's gonna translate, or at least you think it is. So even though we haven't seen as much as we want out of Murphy so far, and certainly I'm not sitting here saying that he's going to be an immediate fix or even everything we wanted him to be as a first rounder, but I do think there's a little bit more there with Myles Murphy than a lot of people are leading on going into next year. I think he's a decent piece to have on this D-line, and with the emergence in the last couple games, I would certainly explore bringing Joseph Ossai back at the right price as a depth piece on that defensive line as well.
Yeah, look, I think I was a little harsh on Myles Murphy after the game on Sunday. I think I was probably reacting to maybe not watching him directly, and just, obviously we didn't hear his name called a whole lot during the game, but I think going back and watching the film, going back reviewing some of the grades, stuff like that, I mean, it showed that Myles Murphy is taking steps, and this is going to be his opportunity. I mean, whether he's ready for it or not, he's going to have to come out and play, 60 to 70% of the snaps moving forward. I think on on that edge, but and him and Joseph Asai are going to have to figure out exactly what that looks like. It may be a situation where, similar to what they did 2 weeks ago, where they actually have Hendrickson, Osai, and Murphy on the field all at the same time and kind of moving some guys around. But Myles Murphy ended up being the highest graded pass rusher on the Bengals this week, got an 85.0 from PFF. You mentioned it, 35% win rate. They added a hit to his total after the game. He didn't have that. So that was his, from what I can tell, that's his first QB hit of the season.
That's
but
big time.
Look, I think in reality, this is, again, not to take away from the Hubbard injury or anything like that, but this is something that a lot of fans would like to see, is giving these younger guys an opportunity to really show what they can do on tape. Unfortunately, when you're only getting, for Myles Murphy at least, 20, 14, 23, 26 snaps a game, it's really hard to put together that consistent tape that you really would hope to be able to put together as a professional. And so this is going to give him that opportunity. He's going to get a chance to really show what he can do. And, as we look at the schedule coming up, and, we're going to talk about it on Thursday, I'm sure, but the Bengals will go up against Dorian Thompson-Robinson with the Browns now as they move on from Jameis Winston. He's a mobile quarterback, and this Bengals team has struggled with mobile quarterbacks. So these edges and containment are going to be a big piece of the game plan on the defense, trying to figure out how you contain Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who, again, came in a relief role last time the Bengals played. But that relief role, if I remember correctly, and I can pull up the stats really quick just to confirm, but Dorian Thompson-Robinson ended up 3 carries for 44 yards in that game. I don't think that's something that you can allow to have happen and allow DTR to get free against the D line. So really going to be a lot of pressure on Myles Murphy, Joseph Asai, and Trey Hendrickson to make sure that they contain DTR. And this is an opportunity for him to put on tape what he can really do.
Absolutely. And you mentioned that DTR is playing this week for the Browns, and we'll talk about it more on Thursday when we preview that game. But certainly my first thing I thought when I saw that was maybe Jameis would have thrown a couple picks against this Bengals defense, but it would have been 400 yards and 6 touchdowns as well. So I'm very glad that they made the switch to DTR. Maybe not as fun of a game, but we're still focused on the playoffs, so we're focused on winning. Right, Craig? Playoffs.
Playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? We're talking about playoffs? I just hope we can win another game.
And on that note, we'll go back to the film. Third touchdown of the day for Joe Burrow, and this might have been the best throw of the day, or one of them for sure on Burrow's case. Deep touchdown pass to T. Higgins, kind of a resurgent game for Higgins after the no-show in Dallas, and just a great throw by Burrow as he's getting hit, getting knocked down. And that's courtesy of our dear friend here on Chatterbox Bengals, Cordell Volson. He decided on this play he wasn't going to block Arden Key and instead just let Arden Key run straight into Joe Burrow. So big time shout out to Volson. We got to get this O-line healthy and get it resituated to where these guys aren't in there, because these guards are abysmal, man. But great by Joe Burrow to stay in there, take the hit, and deliver the throw. This was one of the best celebrations of the week. I hate how often he's on his back throwing a touchdown, but I love the on his back celebrations. I think those pictures are always fun. He threw his hands up after this one, and really just a great play. And T. Higgins to hold on to the ball through the contact. Really a great receiver when he's out there.
Yeah, I mean, T. Higgins holding on to that ball is the best part of this play for sure. I think Burrow obviously would have liked to leave that ball out ahead of Higgins a little bit better than he did. He probably underthrew it because Arden Key,
in his throat,
like you mentioned, went completely unmatched here. Did Arden Key have like his best career game this past weekend? Because it felt like he was blowing things up. I mean, he was everywhere, unfortunately, against that left side of the line. But yeah, like you mentioned, Joe Burrow, for someone who's been as injured as he has been, for someone who has missed the number of games that he has, for him to be willing to just stand in there and take that kind of hit just tells you a lot about where he is mentally. I think there were some times at the beginning of the year where it felt like he had some happy feet. Maybe he wasn't stepping into throws the way that you would hope that he would. It really feels like Joe now is a lot more comfortable in his body and feels like he is at this point, 100, maybe not 100% healthy. No quarterback at this point in the season is 100% healthy, right, but certainly as healthy as he's going to be going into week 16 of an NFL season.
Yeah, and a game kind of unanimously labeled as the worst of Joe Burrow's season so far, and when 26 of 37 for 271 and 3 touchdowns. I know the 2 picks weren't pretty, but when that passing chart is one of, if not the worst of your season, man, we got a damn good quarterback in Cincinnati, Craig, because that's a pretty pass chart, if you ask me. Obviously, the 2 red dots you want to remove, but that's spreading the ball around the field. That's a deep touchdown. That's a quarterback that's in the MVP race if you're not 6-8.
Yeah, we don't need to get into that conversation today, Joe. I have some real heavy thoughts on Joe Burrow's MVP case, but yeah, look, I still would like to see the Bengals take a few more shots every once in a while. I think they're a little bit more reserved in terms of the long, deep passes, but when Joe Burrow is able to complete the amount of passes that he's able to complete within 10 to 20 yards, why wouldn't you just pick defenses apart at that point? I mean, We talk about the greatest show on turf back in the early 2000s with the St. Louis Rams, right? Like, yeah, they had some burners, but they also could just pick you apart nonstop with all the weapons that they have. And, you add in Chase Brown out of the backfield and his ability to catch the ball, and it just opens up so many opportunities for Joe Burrow to be able to complete passes all over the field. And quite frankly, very few, if any, defenses have the ability to guard the number of real weapons that this Bengals team has when you're talking about Chase, Higgins, Gesicki, Chase Brown, obviously, all of them. And even guys like Andre Yoshivas, who, again, don't get nearly the targets or the receptions that they may on other teams. But, I mean, he's still a weapon that you have to worry about, especially when you get down in the red zone. Joe Burrow, I mean, he's obviously having a career year. And I want to give a quick shout out. I don't know if you follow them on TikTok or not, but Nerd Sesh on TikTok, one of my favorite watches, had a fun one today. I don't know if you've seen this or not, but they did a list of the top 10 quarterbacks in terms of passing touchdowns that did not make the playoffs.
Okay.
Joe Burrow,
I feel like
already at 38 touchdowns, would be number 3 on that list.
What?
So,
jeez.
Number 1 on the list was Dan Marino in 1986 at 44 passing touchdowns.
Oh no! Don't give me more Marino comparisons.
I know. I literally thought about that. And then number 2 was in 2012 when the other guy we compared him to, Drew Brees, threw for 43 touchdowns.
At least he got one.
He got one. But yeah, as of today, Joe Burrow would be tied for 3rd on that list at 38. And oh, by the way, he's got 3 games left. So if Joe Burrow does not make the playoffs this year and this Bengals team fails to win out or doesn't get the help that they need, Joe Burrow will go down on a infamous list of quarterbacks that didn't make the postseason despite having record numbers.
Painful. Those record numbers haven't resulted in wins because of how bad this defense is. It's not rocket science. We all know exactly how this season has gone, and usually, at least through the first 14 weeks of this season, a 2-interception game by Joe Burrow, regardless of what he does statistically outside of that, would have been too much to overcome because the defense lets the other team score every single time down the field. Well, the Bengals were able to win by 10 while turning the ball over twice. 3 times, actually, if you count the Jordan Battle fumble out the back of the end zone. And then the fumble by Joe Burrow, that's 4, right, Craig? You got me. So 4 turnovers, able to win the game by 10 points. And how does that happen with this Bengals defense? Well, we were playing the most giving quarterback in the entire NFL, Will Levis, in the holiday spirit. He threw 3 picks before getting benched, all 3 in front of his ex-girlfriend. So a really, really rough day for Will Levis. Every throw worse than the next. Sometimes you can blame interceptions on other people. We're going to run back that first one because at the end, after he overthrows, or actually it's not as much of an overthrow as it is just a yard inside of Nick Westbrook-Akine and picked off there by Cam Taylor-Britt, and then Trey Hendrickson.
Do we know who he was throwing it to, though? Was he throwing it to the in route or the out route?
I think it was the in route.
Because if we're being honest, it's also a pretty bad play design to have 2 wide receivers in that same area. But
I guess you're right. I didn't think about him throwing it to the out route.
I actually think it was to the out route, which isn't any better because Cam Taylor,
right.
whoever that was, is right on that receiver too. But
Yeah.
Either way, a terrible throw.
Terrible
Sorry
throw, terrible design. But as we watch this one run, follow Levis there as he crosses the 30, 25, 20, tracing down the tackle, and Trey Hendrickson, just for fun, shoves him into the ground at the end. Just for good measure, Trey making sure everyone knows he's there at all times. And then he put up a stink afterwards about throwing the flag. Come on, Trey, you got to know what you did. Will Levis wasn't done, though. Another pick on the day. This one tipped, so I guess not as much his fault, but a great play by Mike Hilton. Really had a phenomenal day, did Hilton, this week. And then this one picked off by Geno Stone, ran back to the house.
By far the worst.
Just an abysmal throw. Not quite far enough, but just an absolutely terrible throw for Will Levis. Geno Stone said that he saw this on film throughout the week and knew right where it was going, caught it, and returned it for 6. Just a terrible game for Levis, and Brian Callahan and the Titans coaches have come out and said that they're planning on making a quarterback change. Haven't announced if it's going to be Mason Rudolph, but I don't know who else it would be, but they said quarterback change is coming for the Titans. So there we go, and we saw that last one there, Geno Stone with the interception, and that brings Geno Stone with a 92.8 PFF grade this week. A little bit higher than last week, which was his highest Bengals performance, and I actually think that's his highest graded game of all time, because if I remember correctly, when after last week, his highest graded game was against the Bengals in week 2, and it was a 91, so I think that was the highest graded game of Geno Stone's career. Funny enough, we talked about going into this last stretch after losing to the Steelers that maybe some of these guys step up with the season mathematically on the brink. And one of them, certainly Geno Stone, but he's not the only guy on PFF that I noticed. And we don't have the fumble recovery touchdown in here, or fumble recovery that wasn't a touchdown that should have been for Jong Meta, but a guy that made the best play on that one, McKinley Jackson. Burst through the line of scrimmage, really fired off the ball, made a great play. He came in as the second highest graded defender for the Bengals at an 87.5. Just not something I think many people expected out of McKinley Jackson ever to be graded that high, even at the peak of his career, much less this early in it. So a really great sign there by McKinley Jackson to put some really good film out there in this game.
Yeah, well, and a majority of that grade coming from his run defense. So to be able to get a pass rush, one of the few times that he was able to get in there in the backfield, good to see. I mean, the Bengals do have a couple of young D tackles in McKinley Jackson, excuse me, and then also with the kid from Michigan, Chris Jenkins, who are supposed to be very good against the run, right? So long term, this Bengals interior against the run should be pretty good. Whether or not they're going to be able to get any pressure on the pass is going to be the question. We obviously saw that there from McKinley Jackson. And look, Jacob, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but we certainly never thought we'd be giving thanks to the defense for the potential of this Bengals team getting into the playoffs. But the Bengals pick off Will Levis 3 times. The Titans then bench Will Levis in favor of potentially Mason Rudolph. And guess who the Titans play this week? Oh, wait, it's the Indianapolis Colts. And if the Titans can beat the Colts, guess what? That gives the Colts 2 losses, which leaves the Bengals only needing 2 other things to happen in order to get into the playoffs, Jacob.
Just absolutely crazy. Well, one of those things Thursday night, we certainly need the Chargers to take care of business against the Broncos. And there were some bubblings before we got on live tonight that Hubbard is potentially questionable, might not be able to go in that one, which would certainly be a big blow for Bengals fans that I know are cheering pretty hard for the Bolts on Thursday night. But we're still here, and you're absolutely right that we are alive, and in big part it is because of the defense. And 27 points to the Titans isn't pretty, and to touchdown in the first 2 drives of the game, certainly not how you want to start it, but they buttoned down at the end, in the middle parts of that game towards the end, and they really played a decent game all around. One of the better games they've played all year, even if it was because the quarterback was giving the ball away on some bad throws, but still, we'll take it with this unit. We'll take whatever we can get, and I said I wasn't going to do it, but we're 2 weeks into a 3-week stretch, so I'll just pose the question instead of saying it. Is there anything to build on from the last 2 weeks for the Cincinnati defense? Potentially.
Well, first of all, let's just say that this game Thursday night is huge. We talked about it on
Huge.
Sunday after the game, but the two you basically have. Obviously, we already talked about the Colts need to lose twice, the Dolphins need to lose twice, and then you either need the Broncos or the Chargers to lose out. If the Chargers lose on Thursday night, they end the season with the Patriots and the Raiders, Jacob. So you really, really need to be pulling for the Broncos because their schedule is a lot more difficult finishing with the Bengals and the Chiefs than the Chargers. But back to your question, I mean, look, I don't know. I'm really hesitant to start to, give praise when, again, they're playing trash offenses. I asked you before we ever even got into this stretch, I said to you, Jacob, are you going to allow this Bengals team going up against the Cowboys, the Titans, the Browns to lure you back in, to make you believe that this defense isn't as bad as they have been for the entire season?
I think I was
and
honest.
You told
I
me you
said
weren't going to do it.
Oh, did I say no?
You told me you weren't going to do it.
I should have just said yes.
You should have said yes because
I know
absolutely
how this works.
will allow them back in. Look, I 100% am on board with this defense. May not be quote unquote what we've been calling them the worst defense in the history of the league,
right?
But it's not anywhere near good enough to be successful in the playoffs if the Bengals were able to make it.
You're right,
and it's also I'm not even sure good enough to hold the Broncos and Steelers low enough to get there, right? Is it good enough to hold terrible offenses somewhat in check? Sure, maybe. But when your season every single year means that you're going to be facing the Ravens, you're going to be facing the Steelers, it seems like you're playing the Chiefs every year. It seems like you're always going up against high-powered offenses. And in this new age of NFL, where offense is very clearly the focus for a majority of the league, you can't afford to have a defense who, as we have said, is subpar. So, look, is there some bright spots? Sure. I think the real question becomes if this defense has to continue to lean on some of the younger guys, which it's started to do over the last couple of weeks. Can those younger guys continue to step up and show promise long-term so that maybe you feel like certain positions aren't as big of a priority this offseason as maybe you thought, to allow you to focus on other positions that are, right? Like we know that we do not have a pass rushing defensive tackle on this team.
Right.
Do we have two guys that maybe can clog up the run in McKinley Jackson and Chris Jenkins? Maybe, but we have nobody that can get pressure. So that becomes the position to focus on. But if we can get some promise out of Jordan Battle at the safety position, maybe safety becomes less of a need. If you can get some promise out of guys like Marco Wilson and other corners, despite the injuries, maybe that gives you a little bit of focus. Maybe Cam Taylor-Britt showing you that he isn't completely regressed out of any sort of hope that you had. Maybe those are good things, but the concern then becomes, okay, well, does Duke Tobin also get tricked into thinking that he doesn't need to upgrade in those positions and all drafting a wide receiver in the first round again and a running back in the fourth round and all of these non-need positions? At the end of the day, if the Bengals aren't drafting in the trenches in the first 3 rounds, I'm going to be extremely disappointed regardless of how the rest of the season goes.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair point. I think the false confidence in a lot of these pieces is something to be worried about as we get toward the end of the season. A lot of people in the chat saying dead cat bounce, and that's definitely a worry with this defense. Maybe these guys are, just a result of the season being over and finally wringing out the towel. But I think if anything over the last 2 weeks, maybe the only positive and something I am willing to go out and say is Geno Stone's at least been moved from the definitely cut this offseason to maybe not cut this offseason. I think he's slid at least one basket over. Maybe you still have the conversation, look at the whole body of work. He's been terrible. But these last 2 weeks, he's been exactly what we asked him to come in here and do. And at a pretty high level when you look at the overall grades at least. So I don't know if you can believe in the whole unit. Definitely plenty to worry about there, but I think at least in his case, maybe there's something to build on as we move into next year, and maybe he is wearing stripes, as much as many of us kind of crossed him off at the midway point of the season.
You're playing Cooper Rush and you're playing Will Levis.
Yeah, no, you're right, and he still can't tackle. But if he gets 2 more picks against Bo Nix and DTR, he's not going anywhere. So
Tissett's all in.
we'll keep an eye out for that. Look, I'm trying not to be. I took myself out of the playoff machine earlier today because I started saying the word easy. And I was like, this isn't even close to easy. So
the fact that you're even in the playoff machine is ridiculous. We know what the scenario is, Jacob. We've talked about it on the show. You've talked about it on Off the Bench.
It's too difficult. There has to be another door that people don't know about yet, and I'm gonna be the one that finds it. But no luck on that yet. And the only way we're going to be able to keep having this conversation is if we keep pulling out the wins. And it doesn't matter if it's ugly or if it's a blowout. And we certainly haven't had many blowouts this year, and all the wins have been ugly. But they all count just the same, and we'll take them. This one against the Titans, one of the ugliest. We talked about it after the game. I'm not sure who's to blame. But when you have 14 penalties for 113 yards and the amount of turnovers the Bengals had, 4 turnovers on the day, there's someone to blame for that. And maybe it's the injuries and the roster being vastly inexperienced. I mean, a lot of those false starts, 2 on Cam Grandy, 1 on Matt Lee. And then you had, the turnovers. Jordan Battle drops it running into the end zone. Whose fault is that but Jordan Battle's? Obviously, Joe Burrow already beating himself up pretty publicly about the picks. So I'm not blaming the coaching staff for all this stuff, but 14 penalties for 113 yards, that seems like a problem that you do have to put on the coaching staff. And then when you couple that with the turnovers, and it's one of the sloppiest games any team's played ever, I think there has to be a conversation had about what's going on here.
Yeah, look, I think ultimately everybody's going to try to point the finger at Zach Taylor right now. I think that seems to be the easiest way to go about it, if we're being honest. And whether or not that's the reality or not, I don't know. There's a lot of guys right now who are having to take on roles that otherwise weren't expected, or having to throw in Devin Cochran, for instance. Gandy should never be playing. Like, these are guys who shouldn't even be in the lineup to be able to get these penalties, right? So I struggle to put the blame on Zach Taylor when ultimately I just don't know how much of that is on him versus on Duke Tobin versus just on bad luck and injuries. Like, I don't know. I wish I could have some really good stats behind, who gets called for the penalties and all these other things. Like, the truth of the matter is that despite how little they've played, guys like Dejon Anthony already have 2 penalties on the season. Tanner Hudson has 2 penalties on the season. Like, I don't know. Matt Lee obviously picked up the penalty. It's just like one of those things where, young guys are going to get penalties because it's just the truth of the matter. And so how much of that goes on Zach Taylor? How much of that goes on just the fact that you have young guys? I don't know.
One of those penalties that does fall squarely on the shoulders of Zach Taylor is the delay of game at the goal line. He even said,
well, not if you believe what he said, that the headset was going out. Doesn't mean that he shouldn't have called timeout. You're right. You're right.
I'm saying either way, if the headset's out, you call the timeout. If the headset's not out, you call the play. Like, it seems pretty cut and dry to me. And I don't know how you get up at the podium and you basically say, well, with calling the play and the clock and all that, it's just a lot on my plate. Yeah. Is basically what he said. And it's, buddy, that's your job, man. You're a head coach in the NFL. There's 32 of these jobs in the world. A lot of people want them. Maybe don't say it's too much on your plate to be doing all this stuff. I don't know. That really rubbed me the wrong way. And really just to have that sloppy of a game and then the blow up on the sideline, obviously afterwards, which we're going to get to in a second here. But it felt good to win that one because we've preached week in and week out the perfection. And Joe Burrow says it at the podium every week. Oh, I have to be perfect to win the game. Well, none of the 3 sides of the ball were perfect on Sunday. A missed extra point because of a botched hold, a defense fumbles, a fumble recovery at the goal line out at the back of the end zone, and obviously the offense with the 3 turnovers themselves. No side of the ball was perfect. They all played some of their most flawed games of the year, and we still put out a double-digit win. This is what we're supposed to be doing. This is how the Bengals are supposed to be. Look, we play a terrible game against a terrible team. We still hang nearly 40 and win by 10 because we have an MVP caliber quarterback. We have elite weapons, and we have some pieces on the defensive side of the ball that are relatively exciting. And Trey Hendrickson and some of the young guys that we talked about. This is supposed to be how this team operates, where we shouldn't have to be perfect in order to win games. And I think that's why it's been so frustrating, is because even though it's been few and far between, we've seen glimpses of what this team can be this year, and I don't know if it's just optimism going into next season as we see the hopes and dreams of 2024 slip through our fingers, but are we as far away as we thought earlier in the season? Or is it a little bit closer than we think? Obviously, there's a lot of pieces on defense. I'm not asking about buying back into the defense. That's what we just talked about. But the team as a whole, we're more optimistic about bringing T. Higgins back than we ever were in this city. We're more optimistic about the running back position than we've ever been in this city after letting Joe Mixon go with Chase Brown's emergence in the last few weeks. Amarius Mims looks like a great rookie tackle. Obviously, Orlando Brown's injury is tough, and we know we have to replace the guards. But there's a lot of pieces on this team that I think have been trending upwards in the last few weeks, even though maybe a couple of the games haven't broken our way. I think this has been a good building block of a month for the Bengals going into next year, even if the rest of the season doesn't go our way, even if we are unable to win out or we don't get the help we need. I think we've seen some stuff here at the end of the year that makes me think maybe we aren't as far as I thought going into this offseason.
I think that's the exact mentality that we don't want Duke Tobin to have. I mean, if we're being honest, we just got done talking about how much are we going to allow these players to make us believe that we're not as far away as we think we are.
I'm saying you still have to.
And now you're going to turn around
roster.
Yeah, but you also can't get sucked into believing. Maybe you just can't go into the offseason believing that you have the answer in Geno Stone or whoever.
Right. Yeah.
Ultimately, we know the positions of need, right? We know that there's safety, linebacker, interior defensive line, edge rusher, guard. Like there's a lot of needs. Obviously, if T doesn't resign, you need a wide receiver as well. The question becomes who's the best available at those positions.
Yeah.
And what you can't have happen is for Duke Tobin and this front office to deprioritize certain positions and take them off of that list because they think others are higher priority. In the reality of the whole conversation, and this is my opinion, the first and foremost priority on this team, if we're being honest, is offensive guard. As bad as this defense is, I truly believe that the biggest need we have is on offensive guard. Now, beyond that, I think in terms of like the gap between where you're at and where you should be, right? That's where I'm talking about. Is it like the number one priority in terms of like, in order to fix your team? Maybe not. There's so many holes on the defense that have to be fixed too. But like, if you're really talking about current talent level versus like minimum expectation talent level, guard is 100% the position that is lowest below expectation. But in terms of like needs and getting this team as a whole and better, I mean, obviously you talk about the interior on the defensive line. We haven't really seen enough there from anybody. So that position has to stay at or near the top. So as good as Chris Jenkins may look, as good as McKinley Jackson may look, you can't get fooled into thinking that one of them can then translate into the pass rushing defensive tackle that you need, because that was neither one of their strengths coming into the season, and it's certainly not their strength now still. So you still need to address that. Certainly the conversation around Geno Stone and where safety fits into your needs is a conversation. You have to replace Von Bell, though. So the question becomes, is Jordan Battle going to be that answer, or are you going to have to go another direction? I know you're a big fan of Jordan Battle, but if you went into this season believing that Von Bell was that much better that you weren't willing to give Jordan Battle any snaps for the first 13 weeks, then why does that change now? Look, there's always situations in sports where guys are given an opportunity and they earn their way to stick around, right? Like that happens all the times. And you hear people say, oh, well, you can't lose your job to an injury. Well, you can lose your job to the guy who replaced you because of that injury. And so, yeah, there are opportunities for guys to show us that they have roles on this team, but it can't diminish the fact that those positions are still positions of need. And so, yes, I want to see improvement out of these young guys. I want to hope that I can go into 2025 with some of them being contributors.
Yeah.
But I also don't want to get content and believe that this is going to happen and have faith that, oh, these last 3 weeks against terrible offenses and terrible quarterbacks is the reason why. Now, if we come out and we're able to shut down Denver and you're able to go into the end of the year, shut down Pittsburgh, and actually look good against decent offenses, maybe we can have the conversation. But as of right now, I'm not ready to admit or take any positions off of my list of needs. So we'll see. But I'm worried that that's the exact mentality that Duke Tobin is going to fall into, and then he's going to get back into drafting luxury positions.
No, and that's certainly a concern for the Bengals this offseason, because we've seen that happen before. We've seen the Bengals kind of play themselves up at the end of seasons before, and then you turn around and you don't necessarily address the needs that you should address. You mentioned there that guard is your top need, and I certainly agree. I've said time and time again that the two people I want to take in the first round are the two SEC linemen that I think could play guard and then potentially play tackle later in their career. But just talk about how bad that interior's been this year. Obviously, Orlando Brown's been hurt. Mims, a rookie, has played well at times, but has certainly struggled, had some growing pains. Joe Burrow has faced pressure on 201 dropbacks this season. That's more than any other regular season in his career. 197 in 2021. Just insane how much pressure he's facing. Still with 4 weeks to go, 3 weeks to go. Just insane that he's had to deal with this. And the crazier part about it, and we talk about it when we go through the key plays, I showed you the 9 seconds snap to throw on the touchdown pass to Chase Brown, but he's pressured 201 dropbacks this season, the most in his career. This is the lowest pressure to sack percentage of Joe Burrow's career. 2024, 16.4%, down from 19 the year before, 22 the year before that, 26 the year before that. Joe Burrow just keeps getting better at what he's elite at, which I hope the Bengals front office isn't watching this and saying, oh, sack numbers go down, offensive line improving. No. Sack numbers go down because Joe Burrow is a magician. You have to improve this offensive line. He's getting pressured too much. He's getting hit too much. I know it's not resulting in sacks. We just showed you the hardest hit he took of the day, maybe, and it was on a touchdown throw. This happens basically every single week, and it's just not sustainable because that is your biggest investment. We can talk about filling holes anywhere on the team as long as we want, and we certainly will all offseason. But if Joe Burrow gets hurt, it doesn't matter how much we invest in the secondary or how much we pay T. Higgins and Jamar Chase or what Chase Brown does in the backfield. None of that matters. 9 has to be upright for the investments this offseason to even make sense. And that's why I think the investment starts with the offensive line, with the guards. Get more athletic, get more versatile, and maybe you can chop down the need at guard if you can build up some confidence in Matt Lee at center this offseason. If you can play Matt Lee at center with confidence next season and believe in Karras at guard, then boom, that takes the need down from 2 to 1, which is certainly a better place to be. I think there's ways that the Bengals can kind of work around a lot of needs that they have this offseason and make the money work with a couple big contracts on the books coming as well. So I'm really optimistic as we move forward. I think a lot of the tough decisions are being made easier in terms of cuts as the season goes on. Kappa really not showing you much. Hubbard's injury might throw a wrench in those plans, but certainly nothing on the field that led me to believe that he was going to change their minds as the season progressed. So that's certainly going to be the first thing that we learn as the offseason goes on, is how serious the Bengals are about turning around this roster, is how serious they are about eating dead money, because we know they're going to have to do that in order to attack the pieces that they have to sign to become a legitimate Super Bowl contender again. And we'll see what happens. Joe Burrow has kind of talked more in the last week than maybe the first 3 years of his career about what should be going on in Cincinnati, and that started with the T. Higgins comments after the game against Dallas about how he will be back in Cincinnati and the confidence in that happening. And then we saw a sideline conversation after this win between Joe Burrow and Zach Taylor that has basically, for my money, from what I've seen, has led every sports talk show all week. And if I'm going to be honest, it wasn't even going to be in my J-Bar today. I thought it was kind of a nothing burger from this game. We covered it after the game. We talked about it a little bit on Off the Bench on Monday, and I didn't really think there was much more to be said, but it's still everywhere, and people are talking about it quite a bit. Craig, if you had anything that you wanted to say about the Joe Burrow Zach Taylor exchange after this one, I'll let you take it first, and then I can kind of clean it up because I've already kind of said my piece.
Well, I think again. So first of all, tip of the cap to John Boy. I'm sure many of you have already seen John Boy did a breakdown of that conversation, kind of gave us a little bit of insight into at least what he thought Joe Burrow was saying. And then also the best part about the breakdown is that he went back to kind of showcase why Joe Burrow may have been saying what he was saying. And so the truth of the matter is look, we were calling for Joe Burrow to be more vocal for weeks, and we wanted Joe Burrow to be more vocal for a long time, and we needed him to step up and be a leader. And I don't think that him being willing to speak out against Zach Taylor's approach is that big of a deal. Like, he's allowed to be pissed off at his performance. He's allowed to be pissed off at the way that, his team performed. And I'm okay with that. And honestly, like, I don't think that the interaction on the sideline was even that animated, if we're being honest. Like, I always go back to the Peyton Manning interaction when him and Jeff Saturday are going at it, like, getting in each other's faces about making play calls and adjusting the blocks and stuff like that. I love that clip. But even stuff like that, like, these are just competitors, and Joe Burrow wants to be the best in the world. I feel like we can see that out of him all the time. He's never happy with how things are going, or at least very rarely happy with how things go. So I have no problem with it. I think the question becomes, okay, does Joe Burrow have a problem with how that game went, or does he have a problem with the fact that Zach Taylor is happy with the game and how it went? And that becomes the question, is because we don't really know what led up to that conversation, right? We get cut to that conversation and Joe Burrow's on the bench. He's upset. Zach Taylor's facing away from the camera. What happened before that to kind of cue Joe Burrow to go off? We don't know. Was Zach Taylor talking about how great of a game it was, how great of a performance it was? I don't know. Was Joe Burrow just mad because of the delay of game penalty? Probably.
Yeah.
Like that. Yeah. That to me feels like the most likely reason why this whole blow up happened. And of course he's upset with it. The dude's on the 1 yard line and you take a delay of game penalty. Everybody should be upset about that. People on professional sports organizations fight. It happens in different ways in different organizations. But look, we look at last year, Travis Kelce literally put his hands on Andy Reid on the sideline when Andy Reid wasn't even engaged with him because he was so upset. Andy Reid and Travis Kelce are fine. Doesn't mean that there's trouble in paradise. It just means that these are competitors who want the ball, they want to be their best, and they want to win a football game. I have no problem with it.
I'm with you. I'm with you. My guess, and it hasn't changed since Sunday after the game, my guess is after a pretty embarrassing 37-27 victory over the Titans, Zach Taylor was doing his standard, or at least what we see in the locker room. I don't like putting words in his mouth. We don't see everything about what he does with the team, but at least what we see in the locker room after most wins, and it's the rah-rah, here's 5 game balls, what a great win, do it for the city, this is incredible, we finally did it, let's turn around and do it next week, yay, we're so great. I think that's starting to get to Joe a little bit. We know how much of a competitor Burrow is, and we've seen it bleed out time and time again. And I think maybe at the end of this one, and certainly based on what John Boy was breaking down that Burrow was saying, we're 6 and effing 8. It seems like kind of the sentiment of it's not all sunshine and rainbows just because we won a game. I get that it's the NFL, and it's hard to win week in and week out, but it's not great, and none of this has been pretty this year, and I think Burrow was kind of getting that across. I'd have much bigger problem if he was smiling and laughing and hugging and dancing on the sideline. I think that'd be a much more difficult place to be here in Cincinnati, because then it would shift my mindset to, does he even care anymore? But there's no question about that. Joe Burrow cares more than almost anyone out there for the Bengals. He shows you every single week, and that's the only reason why we're still in this hunt, honestly, is because of what he's been able to do this year. And if he wants to be a little bit fed up about the lack of help he's been getting elsewhere, then that's fine by me. But the one thing I did want to talk about
this is like when it just reminds me of the Derek Anderson thing. I don't know if you remember that or not, but Anderson was like caught on camera laughing on the sideline in the middle of like a 30-point blowout loss. And he was the starting quarterback. And then obviously he gets asked about it in the press conference and he blows up, and then you never hear about Derek Anderson ever again. Like, those are the types of things that absolutely peeve me. But seeing a quarterback frustrated or angry at his performance, I'm never going to get angry at that.
No, and it's a good thing that he's just not, oh, I threw 2 picks and we won the game. That's fine. My performance doesn't matter. I like that he holds himself to a little bit higher standard as the leader of this team and the best player on this team. But here we go, and we move on from the sideline conversation. See, there's not a lot more there. These people belaboring this point, saying Burrow wants out of Cincinnati. They're just looking for talking points, trying to fill air. We don't fill air here on Chatterbox Bengals. But the last thing I did want to talk about here, and I meant to work.
I don't know. I fill a lot of air, Jacob. I talk nonstop.
That was the joke. We're very good at filling air. But I wanted to put it in earlier when we were talking about Joe Burrow talking about bringing T. Higgins back and why that's such a big deal. But we'll just pivot to the conversation again here. Bringing T. Higgins back to Cincinnati is such a big deal because of the lack of production we've seen from everyone else in the room. And it's not just it's not just bringing him back. The conversation of whether or not we bring him back would be a lot easier and a lot more nuanced if we had any of these guys showing even just a little flash that they can be a wide receiver too. But I haven't seen that from Yoshivas or Charlie Jones in his time. I think Yoshivas could be a solid wide receiver 3 for the entirety of his career. I just don't think he's going to take that step from wide receiver 3 to wide receiver 2, and certainly Charlie Jones. We've barely seen him play receiver in Cincinnati. It's been all returner and injury list for Charlie Jones since we drafted him, and the guy this year that a lot of people were holding their breath on, maybe he's going to be the wide receiver 2, certainly at least the Tyler Boyd replacement, Jermaine Burton, 3rd-round pick for the Bengals, picked at 80, and was thought to be the easy plug-and-play receiver in this offense. What did it hear time and time again throughout the offseason, Craig? 1st-round talent. How'd we get him in the 3rd round? Well, he's on a pretty interesting list. Craig brought this up, sent it my way earlier today. Our friends over at Gridiron Grading put this one out and said Jermaine Burton falls on a list here of wide receivers drafted in the top 90 since 2010 with 10 catches or less in their rookie season. Really an ugly list here. As you go through the names, another Bengal right there at the bottom, John Ross with zilch. And then you go through the list. We were looking before we started the show tonight, Craig, and there's really just no good players here. The best player career-wise on this list, Eric Decker. And outside of that, really nobody that inspires any kind of confidence if Jermaine Burton ends his rookie season with under 10 catches.
Yeah, no, it's not a good list. Eric Decker, definitely the best name on that list, ended up having a career of somewhere in the range of 8 years, caught 439 balls for 5,800 yards, did find the end zone 53 times. But, realistically, you can't be spending 3rd-round capital on a guy who's going to end up with a career like Marcus Wheaton. I mean, if you look at this list, and we had this conversation beforehand, realistically, Eric Decker, I think, is the outlier, right? Like, he had a fine career. He wasn't great by any means, but he was fine, right? Never a Pro Bowler, never in, an all NFL team selection or anything like that. But he was fine. Had his best years with the Broncos and the Jets. But outside of that name, like, you look up and down this list and it's like, you don't know more names than you do.
Correct.
And I think that tells you something. But like, the fact that I know some people on this list, like Taylor Price, I know because he went to Ohio and I'm an Ohio alum, not because he played for the New England Patriots. Like, I knew that he got drafted, but other than that, like, he didn't do anything in the NFL.
There's a couple guys on this list I was really high on coming out of the draft.
I know there's plenty of names on this list that you're like, oh wow, I thought he was going to be something. And then there's also names on this list where you're like, that guy was never expected to be anybody. Like, I don't remember anything about this, but like, I think at the end of the day, and this is what, Gridiron Grading's point was, is that ultimately the fact that you're not getting him involved early, the track record is there that the likelihood of them getting involved in the future is extremely low. And so what you're left with really is two options. And you either re-sign T. Higgins, which may or may not be more and more plausible now,
Yeah.
or you have to spend premium draft capital on a wide receiver for 2025. And quite frankly, while some people would argue that neither one of those are ideal situations, for me personally, I can't justify spending premium draft capital on a wide receiver in a year where we have so many needs. And so that puts this team in a position of, quite frankly, if it wasn't for the fact that T. Higgins had such a good relationship with Joe and with Jamar,
Yeah.
he would really have us bent over if he
Yeah.
wanted. Like, sorry to be blunt, but like, he has all the leverage in this conversation.
Absolutely.
All of it. All of it. And I know we talked about it. Like, I think realistically the Bengals have to tag him just to see. But they've got to get that deal done. They can't afford to lose T at this point, and they can't afford to draft a wide receiver in the top 3 rounds again.
Yeah, you use the first or second round draft pick on a receiver and you hope and pray he's as good as T. Higgins, or you sign a receiver in free agency that you probably know isn't as good as T. Higgins, and you're saving what, $10 to $15 million on that deal probably versus what you'd pay T. Higgins. It's certainly an interesting conversation and not one that we'd like to be having at 6-8. It'd be a lot easier if we were winning or competing for a Super Bowl, but certainly not where we're at. But it's going to be a conversation that we have all throughout the offseason. Aaron with the $1.99 super chat. We'll take the super chats no matter what they are. Bengals are done. Y'all are delusional. Aaron, you can say that as much as you want. Craig tells me every week that I'm delusional. It doesn't hurt. It really doesn't anymore. I know I am. Michael Rolfe cleaning it up for us. $9.99 super chat. Super chat for needing a Craig and Jacob Seabox Bengals caricature t-shirt available on the Seabox website. That would be a good piece of merch, Craig. We might have to find a way to get working on a caricature t-shirt or something Chatterbox Bengals. Look, we'll work on that. We'll work on getting some Chatterbox Bengals merch up in the store for you guys. We appreciate all the support as always. But one more graph I wanted to throw up here before we went over the playoff scenario one more time before we head into Thursday Night Football, or our Thursday show before Thursday Night Football and the weekend. But the bright spot outside of the superstars, I guess is the best way to put it, because obviously when you talk about the Bengals, you talk about the bright spots, and it's Joe Burrow, it's Jamar Chase, it's Trey Hendrickson, and in a couple of games throughout the season, it's been T. Higgins as well, and those guys have dominated the conversation for the Bengals. But a really, really great piece that has emerged this season is Chase Brown, and I know we've talked about it a little bit more over the last couple shows, but he has been just a phenomenal running back for the Bengals this season, really able to put together everything that you hoped to see out of him after Zach Moss got hurt, and those that had a little bit more faith in him than I did going into the season, maybe what you wanted to see out of him in the first couple weeks of the season, but obviously you weren't able to with Zach Moss getting the majority of the carries. But since taking over as the dominant running back 25 carries for 97 yards against the Titans, 14 for 58, 12 for 70, 22 for 86, 27 for 120. This guy has been a machine. One of the best runners in the entire NFL. I know fantasy numbers are kind of hollow, but a top 5 fantasy running back since being the starter. That just shows how versatile he's been. We talked about going into this season that the Bengals coaching staff told him that he needs to improve the pass catching and pass blocking in his game. Well, he's been damn near the Bengals' third receiver in some of these games. It's been incredible, the production he's had through the air. 318 yards, 4 touchdowns through the air for Chase Brown this year. And here's a graph that I thought was particularly interesting, especially because of how the conversation around Chase Brown operated early part of this season. This is the rushing success rate through week 15 for all the running backs in the NFL, all 32 starting running backs, I should say, in the NFL. As you see right there, barely outside of the top 10, Chase Brown right there at 11, 51.8 success percentage. A really good year so far for Chase Brown. And if you notice something else about the top 10, basically all of those teams are in the playoffs, with the exception of the Panthers, Chuba Hubbard at 5. Obviously, they're not in the playoffs, but all those other teams, playoff teams. And that just shows you how important it is to run the ball. Rico Dowdle at the top, obviously another outlier, but 8 out of those 10 go into the playoffs. Running the ball is important, but A name that, I mean, we're going to point it out when he's at the top of the graphs. We'll point it out when it's at the bottom too. Who's our favorite running back on every list, guys? It's Joe Mixon. We know that. And I know you guys might be looking for him. It's only been up there for a couple seconds. You might not have got all the way down there yet, but he's at 30. 41.5 success percentage. That is about 10 points below Chase Brown, and we did the money conversation for carries and touches and touchdowns and stuff a week ago. I don't have that tweet at the ready, or I'd go through it again, but pretty big discrepancy there in terms of running success for the two running backs, and certainly a big discrepancy in money as well.
Sorry, we just got another $1.99 super chat from Aaron, quote, and he said, "This is me, Jeremy. The Bengals are done."
Thank you, Jeremy.
Jeremy's been blowing up our chat with the Bengals being done. And
look, if Jeremy wants to tell me the Bengals are done for $1.99, he can do it as many times as he wants. I'll just keep letting me know.
That's classic. But to your point, look, I don't think we could have asked for a whole lot more out of Chase Brown. I think when the Bengals went out this offseason and added a running back to the mix, I think the question was going to be, what was that going to look like? And I think a lot of us were pretty disappointed, especially early on in the year, with the lack of opportunities for Chase Brown. And you certainly don't want to see those opportunities come at the expense of somebody else due to an injury. But at the end of the day, what I think that we've gotten out of this is the fact that Chase Brown can and has been a workhorse for this offense, and the fact that he's been able to stay on the field for almost all the plays. I mean, he only comes off for a breather every once in a while. He can play on first and second down. He can play on third down. Thanks a lot to LASIK, by the way. He now can catch the ball out of the backfield. But yeah, I mean, he's been huge, and again, the explosiveness that he brings. I think that touchdown against Dallas last week when he went up the sideline and was able to outrace everybody really showed some of that. He's been able to show that he's not, while being patient, he's also decisive. He hits the hole, hits it hard, and takes what he can get and falls forward most of the time. So yeah, I think ultimately the Bengals have to be happy with the production they've gotten out of him, especially at the price point that they've gotten it for. Obviously, the other piece of that conversation with Joe Mixon is not just his production, but his price tag. And I believe he's making about 10 times as much as Chase Brown this year. So the Bengals, I think we agreed in the moment, Jacob, me and you at least, that it was the right decision to move on for Joe Mixon. But yeah, I think that the Bengals have to be really happy with what they got out of Chase Brown, and more likely than not, they're going to have to add another back to the roster for next year. But it feels really good to know that you have your workhorse and that you just need a complement, and not that you're going to have to go out and find your starting running back for next year.
Absolutely. And for your workhorse to be as versatile as Chase Brown has shown to be this season is great, because when we were operating with Zach Moss as the lead back, you needed Chase Brown to be that speed offset. But if you can have him be a receiving back and that explosive runner between and outside the tackles, what a great piece. Basically anyone can complement that. So you go get a big body to be a goal line back, and boom, you got yourself a hell of a backfield. Maybe get a Sonic and Knuckles of our own. Certainly wouldn't be against that, but not if you're paying T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. That'd be a lot of money on the offense, Craig. That'd be a lot of money on the offense. But we all know what our chances are. We're still stuck in 2024. We're not moving on to the offseason yet, even though there's a lot of offseason talking points bleeding their way into the show as we progress. But Bengals have to finish this season 3-0. Have to win out. Colts have to lose one more. Dolphins have to lose one more. And the Chargers or the Broncos have to lose out. Why are we rooting for the Chargers on Thursday night? Because of the remaining schedules. The Chargers play Denver, and then at New England and at Las Vegas, the Broncos, Cincinnati, and Kansas City. So the Bengals winning out and the Chargers winning would mean we just need Kansas City to beat the Broncos, and then that part of the equation is taken care of. That's why, if you see that graphic and you're wondering why Chargers over Broncos, that's why it's the Chargers over the Broncos, at least in my opinion, because of the remaining schedules. It seems like a much tougher hill to climb if Denver is able to get that win. New York Times had us up at 7%, Craig. 5% bump from Sunday after the win. That's big movement. That's big movement.
It is. I think it's a little high.
No, high?
I think it's a little high.
I think it's a little low. At least give me low. Lie to me, Craig.
No. Look, I talked about it on Sunday. First of all, I think it's difficult to get what you need out of all of the other teams, right? Like ultimately you need the Colts to lose again, which may happen. You need the Dolphins to lose again, which may happen, and you need the Broncos to lose out. I'm not ready to just like accept that that's going to happen. I think there's a lot at play that could change what happens there. The Bengals have to play the Broncos
first as well,
or the Bills have to keep winning. But look, I mean, you've got the truth of the matter is that the Bengals themselves have to still play the Broncos, which need to beat them. They still have to play the Steelers, which are still going to be playing for something at that point, it seems. Like, I don't know that I put our odds of winning out at 7%, let alone everything else happening that needs to happen at 7%. So, look, I'm happy for you. And someone asked in the chat, I mean, Nate asked, he said, put a percentage on it, 100%, 50%. Nate thinks that we have a 10% chance of making the playoff.
That's right around where I'm at. I mean, I think 7's pretty close. But, yeah, right around 10.
Colton asked me to give him some life. I'm the pessimist on this show. Like, reality is that my reality on this show is that I'm the one who's going to look negatively on things. And it's because I spent 15 years of my life going to Bengals games in the 1990s, suffering through Achilles Smith and watching Jeff Blake. And I mean, it just, don't get me wrong. There were some good memories back then, but I am jaded to all get out. And at the end of the day, right now, I just don't have faith in this team to do what they need to do, let alone get the help of what they need from everybody else to get it done. I would love to see it happen, and I'll be right there cheering them on to make sure that it does. Don't get me wrong. But okay, let me ask you this, Jacob.
All right.
Think back to 2021 and the Bengals run to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Is that more surprising, or is the Bengals making the playoffs this year at this point of the season, would that be more surprising?
Oh, I think that run was winning those 4 in a row once we got in was more surprising, I think, than winning these 3. Or are you saying winning all 5 of these? Ooh.
I'm just saying the Bengals in 2024 making the playoffs.
It's close. It's really close.
So
if
here's the thing:
this team could win a couple games in the playoffs, it'd be more surprising. But just getting there, I think it's still more impressive that they got to.
I think getting there would be more surprising to me than actually winning a game in the playoffs.
Really?
I'm not going to lie to you.
Okay.
I'm that fan that thinks that if we get there, we have a chance to make some noise.
If we get in, we're winning the whole thing. I've already gotten to that point. I've already gotten the Super Bowl's in New Orleans. The script's already written. Yeah, if we get in, we're winning the whole Super Bowl. I've already gotten to that point. But it's a tough battle, man. It's a really tough battle to get in here.
Head up, I'm all in on it happening. It would surprise me. I'm a very the reason I don't do the watch-alongs is that I don't react. Like Jacob, on the other hand, is throwing his chair around the room. He's standing up. He's jumping up and down. He's screaming at the top of his lungs.
I've broken 2 chairs this year.
during the Super Bowl, watching the final drives, I'm just chilling there watching. Like I'm evaluating what I'm seeing. It's just who I am as a fan. It's very different than many others. I am aware of that. I'm okay with that. I understand. We've had this conversation on Chatterbox Reds. I understand that many other people enjoy sports in a different way than I do. My analytical brain will not allow me to believe that this Bengals team is making the playoffs.
We'll make you believe then. We're going to make you believe. We're going to win out and get in, and then you're going to have to say, look at me, I was wrong. They proved me wrong, and it's going to be the greatest clip I've ever cut in my life. I can't wait for it. It's going to be a beautiful day because the Bengals are going to win out, and all 17,000 other things that we need to happen are going to happen. and then we're going to get in, and Joe's going to be hoisting the trophy in New Orleans like we all said he was going to do before we kicked off against the Patriots, and that went the way that went. So we're working back to preseason expectations. I think the only way we get there is we get in the playoffs and we get to the end and we win the whole dang thing. And that washes away this whole season of nonsense. But if we're talking about realistic, yeah, Craig, we're probably not getting in. But draft pick talk went away.
Two other chats. Real quick, two other chats I wanted to get to. Colton, a nut cutter member for 13 months. Bengals are alive. Chase Brown is a dog. And quote, who the hell is Jeremy? The other one, I knew where you were going with the conversation, and yet my brain went somewhere else. You were talking about surprises and people outside of the stars who have shown. Amarius Mims came to mind for me as well. Sean Connor asked the question, is it fair to give Mims an overall grade of a B to B plus for his rookie season thus far? So just real quick before we end the show, what would you grade Amarius Mims so far on the 2024 season?
I think it would be right around a B. The way that he has been able to not give up sacks has been great, but outside of just the stat sheet, he has struggled a lot, and the run blocking hasn't been awesome. I think the biggest thing that's bolstering that grade for me, and we talked about it, I actually don't know if we talked about it on the show, but he's now nearing the snap total he had at Georgia in his rookie year. And the ability to avoid injuries when that was the main concern with him this year, I think that's a full letter grade in and of itself. So if I'm saying his play is a C, then I give him a B for the year for being consistent and being healthy and being out there, because I think that's such a massive piece with him and as we go to move the season on. I think he's been the second best tackle in this rookie class. I don't think that's necessarily crazy to say. Olu Fashanu's been pretty good since he's been thrust into the Jets starting lineup, but a much smaller sample size than we have from Mims, who's basically started all year since that Trent Brown injury. I think Mims has been awesome. It's been everything I've wanted to see out of him. Maybe a little bit better in the run game, gets him up to an A, but yeah, I think Sean Connor's on it right there with a B, B+.
Okay. Fair.
That's a piece that I was really excited about coming in.
My negativity actually goes the opposite way with Amarius Mims. I think I overgrade him. I'd probably give him like an A-. I think given the fact that he probably wasn't expected to play this year really at all, and being able to get what you've gotten out of him has been really good. And you mentioned the stat that I brought up before our call or before our show. But yeah, I mean, Dan Pitcher made the comment in the press conference yesterday that Amarius Mims may have already played more NFL football than college football. And Charlie Clifford looked it up, and he played 803 snaps at Georgia, and he's at 802 now with the Bengals. So his first snap on Sunday will match his overall college snaps in the NFL. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. And to be able to show out the way he has certainly has been great. And again, when you're talking about this Bengals team, one of the challenging parts is that you've got a guy in Ted Karras who's been really good. Amarius Mims has been really good. And you have a lot of faith in the Browns at tackle. And even Cody Ford hasn't been terrible at tackle when asked to be. And he's a guard. So the fact that they've got these pieces like makes me believe that they aren't that far away from protecting Joe. And that's a really big piece. Now, Michael Rolfe with another $9.99 super chat said, let's dream and say the Bengals make the playoffs. Is Orlando Brown Jr. able to come back if that were to happen?
I don't know. I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know. It certainly doesn't seem like an injury that was healthy the first time he tried to come back. And it was a pretty long rehab stint or whatever you call it when he got hurt that he was expected to be out for. So I certainly don't know if he'd be healthy. I do think shutting him down for the rest of the season, if that's the route they go, maybe isn't necessary for the injury, but more because of where the Bengals are at. I like to think that if we make the playoffs, he'd be able to play, because that'd be a long time with this injury.
I mean, it would be a long time, but he looked really bad.
That's what I'm saying. So I really don't know.
I mean, he looked really bad. I think the important thing to remember here is that Devin Cochran first of all, showed out fine against Tennessee. He wasn't bad. The other piece is that Cody Ford, who I just mentioned, has been okay at the tackle position as well. He was out with an illness. He apparently wasn't able to eat for 36 hours, was completely knocked out and lost a lot of weight during that time period. So we should theoretically have him back on Sunday as well. It'll be interesting to see if the Bengals bring Cody Ford in at guard or at tackle. Obviously, before Cody Ford's illness, they had replaced Cordell Volson on the offensive line. Will they leave Cochran at tackle and put Ford at guard, or will they put Ford back at tackle and leave the guards as is? So it'll be interesting to see what happens on Sunday.
Yeah, no, certainly a lot of shuffling that can take place on that offensive line. With the limited pieces, it's kind of funny how versatile it seems that we don't know what's going to happen with that starting group, and there's like 6 healthy linemen on the whole roster. Before we do get out of here tonight, there was a bit of breaking news with a potential Bengals free agency target. One of the bigger names that people had wanted the Bengals to sign this offseason, all-pro safety Budda Baker. Budda Baker reached an extension with the Cardinals, a 3-year, $54 million contract extension that includes $30 million guaranteed. That's the largest third contract for a safety in NFL history, and that contract was negotiated by our dear friend David Mulligetta. So, big-time extension for Budda Baker. Takes a prospect for this Bengals secondary off the market. I know he's a guy a lot of Bengals fans wanted to bring in to this safety room, but not going to be the case as he's locked down in Arizona. That makes this safety free agency class pretty slim. And then one big dog at the top, Javon Holland, was just handed the reins for this offseason because the drop-off from him to the second safety in this free agency class with Budda Baker no longer in it is a big one. So I would assume Javon Holland's about to get a big-time deal in this free agency class. So we'll talk more about Bengals free agency needs, draft needs, and all that stuff when this season ends. But we have a 7% chance to still make the playoffs, so we're still believing. At least one of us is. So Hoo Day, everybody. Big game on Thursday against the Chargers Broncos, and we'll be here before it for Thursday night's Chatterbox Bengals. Craig and I at 7 to 8 to preview this week's matchup with the Browns. And a lot of big things for the Bengals this weekend. We got to watch around the league at this point. We're scoreboard watching, trying to figure out how we can get in. It's a tough spot to be in, not controlling your own destiny, but that's where we are, and we need a lot of help. Hopefully we can get it. Until Thursday, that'll do it for Chatterbox Bengals. Hoo Day, everybody. Thanks for watching.